We often think that a civilization is measured by intelligence, by technology, by artificial intelligence, spacecraft, or the internet. But in the universe, civilization is not judged that way. In science, there is another scale, colder, simpler, and far more unforgiving. It does not care how intelligent you are. It does not care whether you have philosophy, art, or morality. It asks only one question: how much energy can you control? That scale is known as the Kardashev scale. And here's the shocking truth most people do not realize. Humanity is not an advanced civilization. On a cosmic scale, we have not even reached level 1. According to the Kardashev scale, civilization has at least 7 levels, like 7 steps on a ladder, from civilizations that barely survive on their home planet to entities capable of controlling entire universes, multiverses, and even reality itself. And the uncomfortable reality is this: despite all our technology, despite AI satellites and Mars probes, we are not climbing that ladder. In fact, we are not even officially on it yet. So the question is no longer, how intelligent are we? But instead, where do we truly stand in this universe? 1. Humanity is not a Type 1 civilization. This may sound wrong at first. We have the internet. We have artificial intelligence. We have satellites surrounding Earth. We have probes traveling billions of kilometers into space. But in the universe, civilization is not measured by these things. In science, there is a far colder standard known as the Kardashev scale. It does not ask how intelligent you are. It does not ask what technology you have. It asks only one question: how much energy can you control? And here's the first shocking truth: humanity has not reached Type 1. On this scale, we are not even considered a true planetary civilization. Our actual position today is Type 0. But if we want to be more precise, using the method proposed by Carl Sagan, humanity currently sits at around Type 0.7. What does that mean? It means we have moved far beyond primitive survival, but we still do not control the energy of our own planet. The primary energy sources of modern civilization still come from oil, coal, fossil fuel sources that are limited and unsustainable. In other words, the modern world is powered by the remains of organisms that died hundreds of millions of years ago. We do not control the weather. We do not control earthquakes. We do not control volcanoes. We do not control the climate. A single natural disaster can still paralyze an entire nation, and climate change remains beyond humanity's true control. This is the greatest paradox of our civilization. High technology does not equal high civilization. At Type 0.7, a civilization can create artificial intelligence, edit genes, possess nuclear weapons, and even hold the power to destroy its own planet, yet still lack the maturity to manage that power. This is also the most dangerous zone on the Kardashev scale. Many hypotheses suggest that most civilizations in the universe collapse between Type 0.7 and Type 0.9 before they ever reach Type 1. And that is exactly where we are now. Not at the bottom, but not high enough to be safe. We are standing right before the first step of true planetary civilization, the place where countless civilizations have stumbled and never moved forward again. 2. Type 1, the survival threshold of civilization. Type 1 is not a technological milestone. It is a survival boundary. According to the Kardashev scale, Type 1 marks the moment when a civilization truly gains control over all the energy of its home planet. Not merely using it, but mastering it. A Type 1 civilization can capture all the solar energy reaching its planet, harness wind oceans and geothermal power on a global scale, and run its entire society on fully renewable energy. At this level, energy is no longer something to fight over. It becomes basic infrastructure like air. But what makes Type 1 truly important is not electricity itself, It is the consequences. A Type 1 civilization is no longer passive in the face of climate change, can regulate weather at a planetary scale, predict and reduce natural disasters, and no longer collapses because of droughts, floods, or earthquakes. In other words, Type 1 is the first time a civilization no longer fears the planet it was born on. And here is what most people fail to realize. Type 1 does not require extraordinary technology. It requires global cooperation. No more nations above nations, short-term interests, localized exploitation. A Type 1 civilization must think as a planet, not as competing tribes sharing the same rock. This is why many hypotheses suggest the hardest step for any civilization is not technological progress, but overcoming itself. If humanity fails to reach Type 1, we may continue advancing technologically, continue becoming more intelligent, continue becoming more powerful, yet remain permanently fragile, one major shock away from collapse. Type 1 is not the summit, it is only the first doorway. But it is a doorway that no civilization can bypass if it hopes to survive long enough to truly see the universe. 3. Type 2, a stellar civilization. If Type 1 is the moment a civilization masters its planet, then Type 2 is the moment it reaches out and touches its own star. According to the Kardashev scale, Type 2 marks the stage when a civilization can harness the entire energy output of its star. Not just the sunlight that falls on a planet, but nearly 100% of the energy the star produces. To achieve this, a Type 2 civilization must construct structures on a scale that is almost unimaginable. These are known as Dyson spheres, or more realistically, Dyson swarms. Not a solid shell surrounding the star, but millions, perhaps billions of energy-collecting satellites filling the space around it and turning the star into a vast power generator. At that point, the sun is no longer just a celestial object. It becomes the central energy source of civilization. And when energy becomes nearly limitless, everything else begins to change. A Type 2 civilization does not only exploit its star, it exploits the entire star system. Planets are dismantled for raw materials. Asteroids become mining sites. Empty space becomes construction ground. The star system is no longer a home, it becomes a cosmic industrial zone. This is when one critical concept begins to collapse: scarcity. With stellar-level energy abundance, wars over resources lose their meaning. Poverty is no longer a technical problem, and production limits nearly disappear. The forces that once shaped human history, competition, hoarding possession, become relics of a lower stage of civilization. But there is a deeper consequence. A Type 2 civilization is no longer bound to the planet on which it was born. It can migrate between worlds, design entirely new habitats, and exist independently of any single planet. From that moment on, extinction caused by a planetary disaster becomes highly unlikely. Type 2 is not the final destination, but it is the moment a civilization leaves its cradle behind. And once a civilization has mastered its star, the next question becomes almost inevitable. If one star is not enough, what happens when it turns its gaze toward an entire galaxy? 4. Type 3, a galactic civilization. If Type 2 is the moment a civilization controls a single star, then Type 3 is when that idea becomes trivial. According to the Kardashev scale, a Type 3 civilization can harness the energy of an entire galaxy. Not one star system, but hundreds of billions of stars. At this level, a star is no longer a central power source. It is simply a unit. A Type 3 civilization can build Dyson swarms around multiple stars at once, connect star systems into a galactic energy network, and even relocate or restructure entire star systems if necessary. The galaxy is no longer the sky, it becomes infrastructure. With energy on this scale, familiar physical limits begin to weaken. A Type 3 civilization may extract energy from black holes, manipulate gravity, open pathways through space-time such as wormholes, and move across vast regions of the galaxy almost instantly. At this level, distance is no longer an obstacle, and time begins to feel flexible. But the most striking thing is not the power. It is the footprint. A Type 3 civilization does not need to send greetings. Its existence is large enough to reveal itself automatically. From Earth, we might detect it through galaxies with unusual infrared radiation regions, where stars appear to be missing, or energy structures that cannot be explained by natural processes. In other words, if a Type 3 civilization exists, we do not need more powerful telescopes to see it. We only need to know how to look. And this is what makes Type 3 unsettling. A civilization that controls an entire galaxy is no longer threatened by extinction, does not depend on any single world, and exists at a scale where collapse almost loses its meaning. At that level, if we are noticed at all, would be like bacteria observing a city. And this leads to an unavoidable question. If such civilizations exist, why is the universe so silent? Perhaps because they have outgrown the need to communicate. They no longer care about lower-level civilizations, or we are simply not advanced enough to be noticed. Type 3 is not the end, but from this point on, the line between civilization and cosmic entity begins to blur. 5. Type 4 and Type 5. What lies beyond the galaxy? Type 4. A universal civilization. If Type 3 is the stage where a civilization controls an entire galaxy, then Type 4 is when even a galaxy becomes too small. According to the Kardashev scale, Type 4 describes a civilization capable of harnessing and controlling energy on the scale of the entire universe. No longer focused on stars, star systems, or galaxies, but on the structure of space-time itself, the background energy of the universe, and the laws of physics. At this level, a civilization may manipulate space-time, create or destroy regions of the universe, open and close timelines, and restructure reality on a universal scale. Life at this stage is no longer bound to biology. It may exist as information energy or non-physical consciousness. At Type 4, a civilization no longer lives within the universe. It operates the universe. Type 5, a multiverse civilization. And then even a single universe becomes a limitation. Type 5 is the stage at which a civilization can create control and move between multiple universes. The universe is no longer a single reality. It becomes a version, a model, and an experiment. A Type 5 civilization may create new universes with different physical constants, test different forms of life, and run realities as existence-level sandboxes. At this level, the boundary between science, divinity, and the idea of a creator almost disappears. And here is the most unsettling detail. If Type 5 civilizations exist, then the creation of a universe like ours is no longer a religious question, but a technical possibility. From Type 4 onward, a civilization is no longer bound by space, bound by time, or even bound by a fixed form of existence. And this leads to the most dangerous question on the entire Kardashev scale. If such civilizations exist, are we living in a natural universe or in a universe that was created? Type 4 and Type 5 are not destinations. They are the boundary where the concept of civilization itself begins to collapse. Because beyond this point, what exists is no longer a society, but an entire layer of reality. 6. Type 6 and Type 7 beyond the multiverse. If Type 5 is the stage where a civilization controls multiple universes, then beyond this point, all familiar definitions begin to collapse. In the most extreme extensions of the Kardashev scale, Type 6 and Type 7 are no longer civilizations in the social sense. They are states of existence. Type 6, a civilization merged with reality. A Type 6 entity is no longer limited by physical form, is no longer bound by time, and no longer requires a place to exist. Life at this level may exist as pure energy, information, or consciousness, diffused throughout the fabric of space-time. A Type 6 civilization does not live inside the universe. It becomes part of the universe. At this stage, birth and death lose their meaning. Past, present, and future may exist simultaneously. Individual identity can dissolve into a collective consciousness. Type 7, beyond the concept of reality. Type 7 is the point where science no longer has language to describe what exists. If it must be said simply, this is a state in which an entity can control the omniverse, exist simultaneously across all possible realities, and transcend every physical, metaphysical, and logical limit. At Type 7, there is no civilization, no technology, no evolution. There is only absolute existence. And this is the moment when the most unsettling question emerges. If such entities exist, where does that place us in this universe? In a cosmos this vast, could Earth ever fall along their paths? 7. Where do we stand? From Type 0 to Type 7. From a civilization that still burns fossil fuels just to survive, to entities capable of controlling galaxies, the universe, and even reality itself. This scale is not only about energy, it is about the maturity of a civilization. And somewhere along that scale, humanity stands at around Type 0.7. Not low enough to be invisible, but not high enough to be safe. We are intelligent enough to create technologies that can change the world, but perhaps not wise enough to control them. Out there in the vastness of the universe, there may have been countless civilizations like ours. Intelligent, full of potential, advancing rapidly. And then they never crossed the threshold of Type 1. If that is true, then the most important question is not, are we alone in the universe? But this, will we become a civilization mature enough to avoid erasing ourselves before we are ever noticed? Because in this universe, the most frightening possibility may not be that someone else is watching us, but that we have never existed long enough for anyone to see us at all.